see, what's my sound at? Okay, I should probably actually turn on the sound here since I've got... it doesn't matter. Alright, here we are. So, French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, which feels really weird having in a single chapter, considering I had this for an entire semester in grad school. Like this chapter was an entire semester, and yeah, uh, it's worth an entire semester pretty much. And considering we mash both of them into a single chapter, it's kind of wild. So it might take us a minute to get through this, um, but yeah. So I just put the PowerPoint up on Blackboard, so it's up there now. Yeah. So let's get into it. Um, so long-term causes of the French Revolution. We have discussed most of these, which is why I wanted to make sure that we basically went over the last three chapters so we can know what all these things mean. Absolutism in the Second Estate. The nobles were unhappy about their privileges being eroded. They wanted to move things back to before the king began modernizing stuff and the absolutism of the king's, well, absolutism. Um, because, again, those of you that were here last semester may recall that before, let me make sure that my sound is working, hold on. Before, okay. Oh, really? I don't remember what it was that makes it not do that. The king was just like the most powerful noble, but the noble still had a lot of power over him. But that is gradually changing. The dissatisfied third estate. Um, I mean, that's been really a lot of the last three chapters. And depending on where you were in the third estate, it depended on what you wanted. A lot of the third estate wanted less modernization, so the peasants and artisans, they wanted things to go back to the way they were. Or some wanted more change, such as the bourgeoisie. Um, but all of the third estate felt that the first two estates and the monarch were unfairly benefiting from all their hard work, which, yeah. The Enlightenment, so the whole last chapter. Those that were dissatisfied now had a voice. They had a way to look back at the way things had been, and they had words to put it in. It wasn't just, things don't feel right, but, oh yeah, this is how I feel put into words. And also giving them hope that things could change, because things were changing, and they wanted things to change more. And then, of course, the American Revolution, which I put in parentheses here because, or quotes here, because my main professor was a Europeanist, and as he put it, the American Revolution happened before the war actually happened. The people had decided on their freedom long before the war, and the war was just like the final period on that statement. So it's often called, by me especially, the War of American Independence as opposed to the American Revolution. But anyway, yeah, the American colonies throwing off the royal government, and with the aid of the French, no less, spurred many in France to believe that they themselves could throw off their monarchy, which we'll see how it's different when you are right there next to the monarchy as opposed to across the ocean from them. So yeah, there's George Washington conversing with a random masked man, or hooded man, I should say. There's an image I often use in my American history class of Washington and his men. I think this is after Trenton. So, the short-term causes, the stuff that happened right before the revolution broke out, the stuff that was immediately on people's minds. So, this was the years leading up to the revolution, and then these were like the more immediate causes. So, apologies for how small all this is, but I had to squeeze in a lot. Where's my mouse? There we go. Yeah, Louis the 14th, had been spending lavishly on himself. I mean, he was the one that built, the Tesla cell, so I can't really say. Bankrolled the American War for Independence, just despite the British. The country's economy was not in good shape. 50% of the national budget was spent on loan interest alone. Jacques Necker suggested a tax on landowners to make up the money, but the Estates General had to be called because, well, to pass a tax, you have to call the Estates General, and it had last been called in 1614, like 150 years before this point. It had been 150 years since their parliament or their Congress had been called. And they were going to call them to ask if they could tax them, which they obviously weren't going to be happy about. And then two major texts. Government Commission reports, the Cahiers de Doléances, whatever, grievance notebooks. People from all walks of life speaking up about what they felt was wrong. Basically, people bitching and complaining, which these are the French. That's what they're good at. And more importantly, hey, look, this guy's back. Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès. What is the Third Estate? The central focus for debates in the Estates General. Sieyès believed that each delegate should have a vote rather than each estate, because the way it was, well, before this point, is that each estate had one vote. The first estate had a vote, the second estate had a vote, and the third estate had a vote. So the first estate, which was again like 1 to 2% of the population, had one vote. The second estate, which was about 5% of the population, had one vote. And the third estate, which was 90 to 95% of the population, had one vote. And the first two estates usually were voting together on stuff. So they would just override whatever the third estate wanted, whatever 90% of the population wanted. Even though they tended to send a lot of delegates because they had a lot of people. So Sieyès believed that each delegate should have a vote so that the people who had the population majority should maybe have, a voice. And again, just as a reminder, Sieyès is First Estate. Like, this isn't something he's saying to help himself. This is something he's saying because he feels like it's right. Now, that said, we'll get to what he gets up to later. Also, there was a sudden harsh winter which destroyed crops, froze rivers, which caused the price of bread to jump. In a country where roughly half of the people were barely making enough money to survive anyway, and when the price of bread jumps, that's basically means that percentage of the population is going to starve because they can't afford to eat. And when that happens, there are bread riots. People are going to riot because they can't afford food. And then through all of this, Louis XVI was indecisive. He was unsure how to proceed. When the States General was brought in, he wasn't sure how the voting was going to be decided, what to do about bread prices, or if he was going to listen to the States General at all, because he could, within his rights as the monarch, just tell them to go home. He could just say, I hear that you're saying we should have all these reforms and stuff, and like I get where you're coming from, but also I don't like it, so you guys just go home. So here is again, Saez was a third estate. Everything. What has it been until now? Nothing. What will it become? Something. This is kind of paraphrasing, but again, this is really important for the birth of the French Revolution. Here is. Oh, I was gonna say that isn't Louis. That's Necker. That's Jacques Necker, the finance minister. I forgot I had that. All right. Did I have a sound on that? Hold on. No, I guess not. So, June 17th, 1789. Now, again, unless I say this is a super important date, you guys don't need to worry about the dates. But I'm giving you guys very specific dates here to show you how quickly things devolved. If you've had my American history class, I showed you through the dates like how long it took for us to go from, we're getting shot at by the British to maybe we should actually go to war with the British. Things were a little bit different here. Things devolved very quickly. So, the Third Estate voted to call themselves the National Assembly. They took Saez's writings to heart. This was June 17th, 1789. June 20th, 3 days later, the Tennis Court Oath. The National Assembly swore they would not disband until France had a constitution. Now, a little background on this, because this is, to me, a really good indication of just how riled up they already were. So, they were meeting in, I don't actually know what the name of the building was, in like what would be the parliamentary building if they were in England, whatever the state house was there in Paris. And so the Third Estate, the National Assembly as they voted to call themselves, were going in, and the doors were locked. And so they immediately started freaking out. They're like, oh, we've been locked out. The king and the First and Second Estate, they're not letting us in. They're locking us out because they don't want us to be part of the government. This is a coup, but yada, yada, yada. And so they went to this indoor tennis court right across the street because it's Paris, because of course they've got indoor tennis courts because they're fancy. And in this indoor tennis court, they swore this tennis court oath. That they didn't just call it a tennis court oath because that sounded cool because they were in a tennis court, where they would not disband until France had a constitution. The reason the doors were locked is because they were cleaning the building at the time. But nobody thought to go around and check. They're like, the doors are locked. Freak out. Go across the street. We're not going to disband until there's a constitution. And at this time in history, having a constitution in a country that's currently a monarchy is kind of a big deal. Um, I mean, it's not like, it's not specifically saying the king has got to be overthrown, but it's saying the king is going to have to agree to get rid of a lot of his powers. Because like in England, they still had a monarchy, but they also had a constitution. They specifically had a constitutional monarchy. We already talked about that. But France was specifically like a really powerful absolutist monarchy, and this was a big deal. And them saying, we won't disband until France has a constitution, is saying, if you want us to disband before France has a constitution, it's gonna be violence. So Louis XVI was like, okay, well, we can do some reforms, but the estates are sticking around because I like how things are. The clergy and the nobility get to keep all their stuff. The National Assembly told him where he could stick it. Louis told the Estates General they could go home. But then a big thing happened. The French Guard, who were supposed to go in and politely, at the tip of a musket, tell the Estates General to go home, joined them. And when the army, or in this case the guards, but same thing, when the army joined the brewing revolution, you're done. You're done. We will get to Russia later. The difference in the many times Russia has had an uprising and when the Bolshevik Revolution happened is the army decided to join them. And when that happened, it was over. Like there wasn't an uprising anymore. It was a revolution, and it was done. I mean, granted, there was like years of civil war and hundreds of millions of people died, but like as far as like them getting stamped out by the army, that was it. It was over. Once the army joins the revolution, that's it. July 11th, 1789, Louis dismissed Necker. He wanted an anti-reformist cabinet. The revolutionaries got real pissed about it because apparently, I guess they thought Necker was on their side and started this huge riot which lasted for days. So July 14th, 1789 became known as Bastille Day. This was the third day of the riot. This wasn't like a thing later on. They decided, hey, let's go back out and riot some more. This had been happening. So by the 14th, the crowd, including the soldiers, stormed the Bastille, which was a prison in the middle of the city, as well as an arsenal, so it had some weapons in it. They were planning on freeing what they thought were political prisoners. They were like, oh, we're going to free these people, and they're going to join the revolution, and they're going to be like these major leaders of the revolution. Most of them were like drunks who had been arrested and like put in there until they slept it off. There were some people that were in there for like not paying their taxes. It was like really minor stupid stuff. Like there were no like high name political prisoners in the Bastille. But July 14th, 1789 is Bastille Day. That's their Independence Day. That's their big day. That's an important date, hint, hint. Our big day is July 4th. Their big day is July 14th. They do parades, and they fly jets over, and it's a whole thing. I've got pictures of it. It's great. Bastille Day is now an inside joke for me because this was years ago. My friend went to what is it called? Culver's. She lives in Wisconsin. It's some like Midwestern fast food restaurant. And she's like, man, the line's really long. It must be some kind of holiday. And I checked the date, and it was July 14th. And I was like, it's Bastille Day. And she's like, what? I said, it's an important holiday. It would have nothing to do with the line being long. As in Wisconsin, they would know nothing about it. But I was like, it's Bastille Day. That makes, and I convinced her that it was like some actual holiday that we would have here in the U.S. And then when I eventually told her, she got real pissed about it. So now whenever there's a crowd, I was like, it must be some French holiday, and she gets angry. So that describes my friendship with her perfectly, as we just mess with each other pretty much consistently. Anyway, Bastille Day led to lots of officials being killed and decapitated. They like to march their heads around on pikes because, it was the 1780s. What else did you do for fun? So finally, Louis XVI started making concessions. Marquis de Lafayette was made head of the National Guard, the National Guard being part of the Revolution. If you've taken my American history class, this guy was a major part of the American Revolution. He, I would argue, was as important to us winning the war as Washington was. Like, he was super important in us winning that war. And now he's going to be very important in this revolution. Marquis de Lafayette was a revolutionary through and through. Once again, in case we need, I just realized what this picture looks like. In case we need an image of the three estates, here we are. First, second, and third, clergy, nobility, and everybody else. Although everybody else there is really Napoleon coded. I like that. Although technically Napoleon was minor nobility, but we'll get to Napoleon later. Here we have the tennis court oath. Again, indoor tennis court, very fancy, very Paris. You've got like mythical beings in the windows here. You've got light shining in. Also, by the way, you've got here in the middle, you've got a priest and a noble and a commoner, because it wasn't just Third Estate that was part of the National Assembly. There were First and Second Estate that were like, yeah, we should have more equal representation. It wasn't just Third Estate. There were First and Second who agree with this. I mean, again, What is the Third Estate was written by a clergyman. So it wasn't Third Estate against everybody else. There were some members of the first two estates that were part of this. Although I do feel like this is just kind of the artist who maybe painted this before everything went crazy, hoping there would be unity and peace among the three estates before things got crazy. Here is Old Necker. What's the email? Is it something dumb? Or is it a student actually needs something? Nope, it's something dumb. Here's the Bastille. Like I said, they busted in and burned a bunch of stuff down and got some weapons, which, I mean, if you're going to have a revolution, you need some weapons. And they freed, not really anybody important. This actually isn't from the French Revolution. This is a later... Okay, from this French Revolution. This is from a later French Revolution. They have a few. Here we go. A little bit of Bastille Day. Most people in Paris still really don't like the Eiffel Tower. Which then again, they're Parisians. They don't like anything. Here we go. This is cool. You got the Arc de Triomphe in the background. You've got the soldiers marching through with the tricolor. You've got the tricolor here with the jets. It's neat. All right, on to the Moderate Revolution, 1789 to 1791. And with a name like Moderate Revolution, you know nothing's going to go wrong. Jesus. The modern revolution starts with the Great Fear. Oh, so with the hunger of the bread prices and the grain being destroyed, and the concessions from Louis XVI, the peasants in the countryside started sacking manor houses, taking grain. There were reports of the peasants roasting the nobles alive, and the sort of stuff peasants like to do to the nobles. Had many in the First and the Second Estate fearing for their lives, and they fled the country as emigres. It's the specific term that meant that they weren't fleeing as refugees, but they were going to leave and then come back later to overthrow the revolution. They were going to go out and gather forces from other countries to come back and overthrow the revolution later. Okay, actually, let me. The August Decrees. This was basically a bunch of folks in the National Assembly, National Assembly, which again, National Assembly is third estate, which now is basically the whole government now. It was the third estate sitting around and making a bunch of decisions on how they wanted things to go. They wanted to dismantle legal privileges. All citizens were taxed. Offices were not sold. The tithe was abolished because, again, the tithe back then was just another tax. You paid your tithe as part of your taxes, as opposed to today where you go into church and you pay it if you want to. It was just part of the taxes that you paid to the church as something that you had to do. The Declaration of the Rights of Man, which was basically just the August Decrees that were signed by Louis XVI. So this was them. This was basically them getting these ideas together, and this was these written down and signed. Is what the difference in these two are. This was them in a basement with a bunch of pot getting ideas together, and this is afterwards them putting it on paper and getting Louis to sign it. It's oh, these are some great ideas. Afterwards, maybe we should write it down. So Louis was all right, this was a disaster. I'm going to go back to Versailles and just hunt some more. However, the nation was still in debt. Bread prices were still really high. So a large group of women went to Versailles, accompanied by the National Guard, and with the image I'm going to show you guys, at least one cannon. There was a skirmish with the guards at Versailles. 2 of them were killed, and Louis had to go back to Paris to keep doing work. It's all right, guys, I'm going home. And then the women of Paris were haha, no, you're not. And they went and got him. We're going to talk about a number of these revolutionary clubs. One of them is the Jacobin Club. Actually, I don't know how that will be pronounced. Jacobin? I'm going to say Jacobin because, I don't know, I don't respect the French. No, that's not fair. Maximilien Robespierre was a member, and boy howdy, Maximilien Robespierre is going to be very important going forward. So to deal with the debt crisis, the National Assembly seized church property in order to tax it, because there was a lot of land in France that you couldn't tax because it was owned by the church, which is to say the Catholic Church. So they owned a lot of land. Bless you. They also issued France's first national paper currency, the assignat. I don't know. However, it soon lost value because, again, money is an agreement between people, that it has value, and before this point, money was usually like minted coins, which were made of the currency that it was supposed to be worth, whereas paper money is, this is totally worth some metal that's somewhere in a vault, and oftentimes would drop in value really quickly, and the assignat very quickly lost value. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Here's the picture of the women going to get Louis. Are armed to the teeth. They got pitchforks. One of them's got an axe. That's a freaking like, not a glaive. That's just a straight up pole arm. This one's got a saber. Jesus. Club, and then of course the cannon over here. Yeah. This is serious business. And they show up, and Louis' guards kind of freak out, and two of them get killed in the process. Here is Robespierre. The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant. Yeah. As an educator, I can get on board with that. Two of you have already seen the video that I want to show you guys, and I have a harder time justifying it in a class where we're talking about the French Revolution, so I'm just going to put it up on Blackboard for this class. I might show it when we get towards World War II, but as far as this class, I'll just put it up on Blackboard since there's like only 3 of you in here that haven't seen it, and it's a hybrid course, so most of you are online anyway. And also, this is a long chapter, so we need to get into it as far as I can. To punish the oppressors of humanity is clemency, to forgive them is cruelty, says Robespierre. Robespierre was real big on, let's say, punishing. We'll get into that as well. I'm gonna go with, I don't fully agree with Robespierre on some stuff, and you'll certainly see why by the end of the chapter. Obviously, the church wasn't happy with these reforms because if you took land from the church, they don't have income anymore. You take land and the tithe from the church, then they don't have any income. Because again, most of the income at all back then was from land. You have people working the land, and then they give you a percentage of what they grew, and then you sell that for income, or you just have them sell whatever they make, and then they give you a percent as like rent. So the National Assembly suggested the civil constitution of the clergy. This would make it so that the clergy could make money, but they had to swear loyalty to the state and receive a pension. This was, again, this goes all the way back to last semester with the fight between the church and the empires, where they didn't like the church having power over the Pope having power over the church within the borders of the countries. So they're like, okay, well, as long as you swear loyalty to the state, you can get a pension and basically be a government worker. Only 54% of the clerics agreed, while the rest of them were either imprisoned or exiled. And as we'll see later on, a lot of those imprisoned didn't last very long. So Louis XVI was king for 2 years of the Revolution. As we've seen, he wasn't real firm on his stance either way. He sometimes would let the assembly make decisions. Other times he wouldn't work with them. Most of the times he would just stall. He'd drag his feet. He had veto power, so he would just slow things down. More clerics and nobles would flee the country. A lot in the assembly were concerned that he was keeping in touch with them. Again, as I mentioned, being emigres, they were worried that he was helping them plan some invasion of the country to depose the revolution and get him back in power. So in the summer of 1791, Louis tried to flee France, but this failed. When this failed, the Jacobins used this to prove the king could not be trusted and needed to be deposed. Now, I'm going to show you a picture in just a minute of the king being found. Now again, this is like the 1700s. Not everybody has seen the king. I mean, the king was typically in Paris or really in Versailles. However, since we've got paper money now, what's usually printed on money? Right. And in the case of France with a monarch, what do you think was on their money? Yeah. So these people who are now being given this new kind of money see this bald idiot going by in a fancy chariot, or chariot, in a fancy wagon. It's like, hey, he looks familiar. What's he doing out here? Maybe we should tell somebody. And so he got stopped at a bridge. Also, what is this horse? He's got a massive body and a tiny head. This isn't the Middle Ages anymore. Why is the horse drawn like this? This is the 1790s. Anyway, I mean, I would make jokes about, like, medieval art and horses, but come on. I mean, the horses back here look normal. Well, then again, we can't really see their bodies, but their heads look normal. What is happening? Anyway, I always make fun of that horse. I'm sorry, horse from the 1790s, but good Lord. Anyway. So, July 14th, 91. I don't know why that comma's way up there, because that one's not. Anyway. Second anniversary of the fall of the Bastille, which again is like their big day. So 2-year anniversary of the revolution, I guess. Louis signed the Constitution, but he still was not on board with the revolution. He supported counter-revolutionary violence in the Vendée, which is like this big region of, I think, southeastern France. There's always stuff going on in the Vendée. An Austria-Prussian alliance that intended to push into France to restore the monarchy. However, he didn't do anything big because, again, he'd been caught, so he knew to behave himself. But he still used the veto to slow things down. Still, though, there were rumors floating around that he was plotting to have France be invaded by outside forces. There's another group involved here known as the Sans-Culottes. Culotte is basically the French word for like the tights that the nobles would wear, and sans means without. So Sans-Culottes is the people who didn't wear the tights, which essentially meant they wore pants. They wore workman's pants. They were workers that pressured the assembly. When Le Chapelier passed a law that forbade unions and strikes after the guilds were abolished. And the thing about the Sans-Culottes is that they liked using mob violence. The Jacobins, while the Jacobins were violent, they were more about like pressure and implication. And the Sans-Culottes were like, we're going to break your freaking knees. And then they would. So, yeah. So, in April of 1792, the Assembly decided to preemptively declare war on Austria. um, as they believed the immigrants were a threat on the revolution. Um, and as things often go in France, at least until, well, you'll see. Um, Very quickly, the counter-revolutionary forces were deep in France. They demanded the safety of the royal family. So, in response, the radical revolutionaries attacked the palace. Because, unfortunately, when you're dealing with a revolutionary government, you can't demand that they keep someone within the government safe, because you're going to have groups within that revolutionary government. They're going to be radicals and are going to be like, oh, hey, you want this person safe? We're going to murder them. So they attempted to kill the king. So the king and his family had to seek the assembly for protection. They locked the royal family in a medieval fortress and abolished itself and ordered elections for France's first republic. So technically the revolution was over. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Technically the revolution was over and France's first republic was going to happen. The revolution was still very much happening. But like the war is happening and there's forces within France and the king is locked in, well, the king and his family are like locked in a fortress, and the Revolutionary Council is like, okay, we're gone now. Let's have an election. And it's like, guys, one thing at a time. I'm telling y'all, I don't know how France survived this, or survived long enough for Napoleon to come along. Because then Napoleon came along, and it's just like, now everything's France. Because, yeah. Anyway, here's the Sans-Culottes laughing at a guy wearing stockings. Is pretty much what this is. They're pointing and laughing at this guy. They've also had a lot to drink. Holy crap. This guy is passed out under the table. Yeah, this is what Sans-Culottes were. They wore workman's pants. Whereas, like, nobles and even, like, the bourgeoisie would wear, like, these shorts and then, like, the stockings. Or the tights, because that was just like that's just the fashion of the day, and the Sans-Culottes didn't. That's just literally what the name meant. Is like, oh, they wore pants. They were weird. They were different. Also, again, here's the Phrygian caps. This guy's got a tricorn instead. But the Phrygian caps were this symbol of freed slaves, because again they see themselves as being freed of the slavery of the monarchy or whatever, which is an ancient Roman symbol. Is this? There it is. I knew I had it in there somewhere. It took me forever to figure out how to do that when I did this the first time, so I want to make sure that comes through, because I'm proud of it. All right. Let's see. September 2nd, rumors reached Paris that the fortress at Verdun had fallen to Prussian forces, so radicals panicked, attacked the prisons, slaughtering between 1,100 and 1,400 traitors to the revolution, mostly priests and nuns. And then the rumors that the fortress had fallen proved to be false, so they murdered all these traitors to the revolution for no reason. Again, the traitors to the revolution being priests and nuns that were already in prisons and couldn't really do anything. But, you know, it's the radical revolution. There's a lot of terrible crap happening. So Louis was stripped of the throne in September 22nd. The Republic was created. A vote was conducted on universal manhood suffrage, though obviously women were excluded from the vote, because again, this is still the 1790s. I don't remember when women were allowed to vote in France. I think it was before England. England was 1918. They beat America to it just by a little bit. I think it was either right before or right after the First World War. So the convention is what the republic's like guiding body was called. Immediately after the convention was elected, there were new grain riots, other violent protests, often prodded by the Jacobins and sans-culottes, because, I don't know, I guess the convention wasn't considered radical enough. Oh yes, I forgot about this. So within the convention, there were two factions. The French. Montagnards, and the Girondins. So the Montagnards are known as the Mountain Club. They were radicals led by the Cordeliers and Jacobins. They sat on the higher left-hand section of the uneven chamber floor because the chamber they were in was literally like warped slightly, and one side of the room was higher up than the other, and they all sat over there. The Girondins were from the southern region known as Gironde. They were more moderate, and they agreed to the king's treason, but they didn't agree to his execution, and they came under suspicion, and many were executed in years to come. Now, FYI, this is where we get the modern political left and right from, where these weirdos in France chose to sit. One group chose to sit on the left-hand side of the room, and the other group chose to sit on the right-hand side of the room, and that's where we get the political spectrum from, was revolutionary France. So, there you go. The left-hand group tends to push for more radical / progressive movements, while the right-hand side of the group tends to be more conservative, wanting to keep things as they are. So yeah, there it is. There is the September massacres, the priests and nuns getting murdered by nutcases in the streets. I guess I don't have any pictures of the convention. Also, spoiler, the king got executed. So there was a majority vote for the charge of treason against the king. Many of them were likely pressured by radical members because, again, the radical members like to use violence. The vote to actually execute the king was very close. 361 to 360. And if I remember right, this was after the convention was purged a couple of times, and they sent people home that weren't going to vote for the execution. So yeah, this was a little bit leaning in favor of executing him anyway. So the king's execution was done by this new enlightened invention, the guillotine. Invented by Dr. Guillotine. What a name. Obviously, the name back then wouldn't have meant anything until after he invented the thing, but yeah. It was designed to minimize the suffering that often accompanied executions. Because before this point, there was only a few ways to really execute somebody in a way that wasn't meant to be painful. Obviously, burning at the stake was meant to be painful. Hanging, when done correctly, was meant to be painless, where they drop the platform and you fall and it breaks your neck. But a lot of times that could go wrong. The way they killed Charles I was beheading, but that's with the headsman's axe, and he could miss and hit you in the back of the head. And while getting hit in the back of the head with an axe would kill you, it wouldn't kill you instantly. And you'd have a big chunk of your skull missing, and so he'd have to pull it out of your skull and go for another whack. Not great. Also, if it's a lot of executions being done, the axe is eventually going to start getting dull. And again, you don't want to get whacked twice. You want it once. So with the guillotine, it's, well, like, we've got pictures, but you know what a guillotine looks like. It's on a single thing. Your head's in there. The blade comes down. It's got like a perfect angle. It's weighted. Yeah, I mean, again, not that getting your head cut off is a great way to go, but it's better than previous alternatives. So after Louis was killed, England joined the fight against France. And again, just remember, like 2 chapters ago, England killed their king. England joined the fight against France because the French had committed the crime of regicide. But then again, it's the French, the English fighting the French. Like, they don't need an excuse. But why would they even go with that excuse? Come on. Anyway, so the convention had to conscript about 300,000 men. Many more escaped to the countryside to avoid the draft, causing basically massive, essentially armies of brigands to roam the countryside. So France had as many internal enemies as they did external. Because a lot of times you don't want to join the army, especially in the 1700s. You were as likely to die from malnutrition or disease as you were to get shot in the battlefield. So when the draft comes around, escaping into the countryside and becoming a brigand is often the better choice. So now France is not only fighting Austria, Prussia, England, probably some other countries at this point, but they've also got like hundreds of thousands of bandits just roaming around the countryside. Oh yes, the Committee of Public Safety, one of the greatest names in history. They were set up to choose members of the Revolutionary Tribunal, who tried people accused of political crimes. This is where people were sent that often went to the guillotine. So the Committee of Public Safety set up the group that sent you to the guillotine. Yeah, I love it. This is almost as good as the, what were they called? The Friendly Irish Farmers Union. They were a terrorist group that like fought England for like something like 50, 100 years or so over, the course of, was it 1800s, 1900s? There was a lot of groups that fought England. Yeah, good stuff. And then in the summer of 1793, with England and really most of Europe at this point pressing in against France, the levee en masse, or a general draft. So every non-married adult male was enlisted, creating an army of 1.2 million, which like today is, but back then was insane. So here is the king testing out the new invention. Seems like it worked all right. And yeah, they would just like pull the head up by the hair and show it to everybody. There would be a crowd. Now here, most of the crowd is the army, because there was like a buffer zone of the soldiers to make sure that like some crazy person didn't run in and try to like steal the king's head or something, because again, there are crazy people, but there was always a spectator crowd. So again, here we have the way guillotine worked. It was in a slot here, so it would always fall in the same location. It was on at an angle, so it would cut. So it wouldn't hit all at once, because that isn't as efficient. So it would cut through the bone and ligament, And then, of course, the weight up here, and then it had a certain distance to fall so that it would reach a decent velocity. It worked out pretty well. Oh, I forgot about this. So when I put this together, God, how long ago has it been now? Almost 10 years? This is when the 10-year challenge was a thing on social media, and this came up, and I had to include it. So there you go. That was the Queen, by the way, in case you didn't know who the Queen was in France, Marie Antoinette. All right, on with that. So, geez, we're not even halfway through. Which, granted, this is the French Revolution and Napoleon, so like, we're not even to Napoleon yet. Day, Radical Revolution. Oh yeah, there's so much stuff. All right, Reign of Terror. So, in September 1793, there were a bunch of laws put together to basically say, hey, if you're not for the Republic, you're against it. And if you're against the Republic, we're sending you to the guillotine. Anyone suspected of opposing or who may eventually oppose the revolution could be put on trial. So basically, if you're in the clergy or aristocracy, you're immediately in danger because due to your station, you might one day be a danger to the Republic. Lynch mobs often took justice into their own hands and hung people from lampposts, which, as I've already mentioned, is the worst way to be hung because that strangles you slowly and isn't great. There was also the general maximum. If you sold bread above a set price or were hoarding grain, you were seen as a traitor to the Republic. And the prescription for treason is execution. So between September of 1793 and July of 1794, 16,000 people died by guillotine, while another 12,000 people died in prison awaiting trial. Because again, being in prison in this era sucked. Again, those of you that have had my American history course, more people died in British prison of war camps than died in battle in the American Revolution. There are also multiple civil wars. Some 200,000 people were killed in the Vendée alone. Again, I don't know how France made it through this in one piece. I don't know how in the world France still exists as a country. Just from this, just from the French Revolution, considering how much it tore itself apart and fought like all of Europe at once. Anyway, here's the guillotine, still doing its thing. This one is a bit more modern. Oh. I don't have it. All right, also. And then I also have that and that. I don't know why you put all that up there, but whatever, Ubisoft. Right. Who knows the last time the guillotine was used to execute somebody? Like what year? This is all happening in 1793, 1794. Well, the Reign of Terror ended late 1794. But when do you think they used the guillotine for the last time?
It was mid 1800s.
1977, the year the first Star Wars movie came out. Yeah, the last time they used the guillotine for execution was, I think, the same year or the year before the first Star Wars movie came out. 1977, 1976, something like that. Like, it was relatively recent, which, I mean, now, 2025, it's late 50 years now, but still, relatively recently, considering we're talking about the 1700s here. Yeah. I mean, it was considered a special case, I think, but then France was like, yeah, we need none of those anymore. All right, let's do one more. Well, let's do a little bit more with Revolution Beyond France, because there's some neat stuff here. So despite all of this, the Revolutionary Republic still managed to, well, like I said, somehow not die, but actually push beyond its borders. They overran the Austrian Netherlands. They attacked combined Prussian-Austrian troops. They took the Dutch Republic, and they even took parts of Italy by the late 1790s. And they turned them into sister republics. So they weren't technically, big air quotes for you Align folks, I'm throwing up the biggest air quotes I can, technically part of France, but they were made into republics like France, under French administration, but, you know, independent, air quotes, yeah. Like when we brought democracy to the Middle East, you know, like that. Not everybody appreciated the freedom French brought, especially when France used their resources and even conscripts from their sister republics. Also, France had a pretty strong anti-Christian policy, which pissed everybody off. In fact, we'll get to that more specifically when we talk about Gibraltar. Trafalgar, which I find especially amusing because, well, it's the English. All right, let's do a little bit more beyond France. Poland. Once again, Poland was eaten by Russia, Prussia, and Austria, and the Poles wanted to take their land back. Led by, I used to be able to say this, I can't say his first name, Kusiko is how his last name is said. They managed to push the Russians out of Warsaw, but by October, the Russians had rallied and took Warsaw back, killing between 10 and 20,000 Poles in a day. Yeah, Poland never catches a break. They're just in a really rough place, which is why I have said multiple times, because again, history happens in patterns, and as a historian, if Ukraine falls, Poland's next. Like, I'm not trying to see the future. I'm saying I've seen this before. And old Vladdy Putin's going to be like, well, you know, Poland used to be part of the USSR, so I'm just saying, we got to take Poland. Ireland's always being trouble. Poor Harvest in 1796 led Wolfe Tone to rise up. They hoped to receive aid from the French because, you know, the French and the Irish both hate the English. And a lot of times the French would send weapons to Ireland just for the hell of it. The Irish death toll in 3 months of 1798 topped at 30,000, including Wolfe Tone himself, who was captured. While this rising bore little fruit, it would not be forgotten. In fact, while I was there, there was like a special exhibit in the College of Dublin, the library at the College of Dublin had like the special exhibit that specifically talked about this uprising. Because they just really freaking like every uprising they've ever had, despite the fact that they had one like every 30 years, it felt like. This led to the 1800 Act of Union, which made Ireland part of Britain, which technically gave them some level of representation, but only for the Anglicans there, and considering the Irish were Catholic. There's Kuziko. There's the Irish. You can tell they're Irish because this guy is punching the cannon. And Wolf Tone. Do we want to do... Okay. Let's finish with Saint Dominique. I know I usually let you guys out a little bit early, but let's at least do Saint Dominique, and then we'll be finished with this section, and then we can do revolutionary culture next week. So, Saint Dominique, which was a French Revolution. I can't words. French possession in the Caribbean. There was a large population of free blacks that wanted citizenship. In mid-1791, the French government gave them citizenship, but plantation owners there wouldn't implement the law because of course they wouldn't. So the free blacks, they were like, hey, how about we get the slaves to help us out? And the slaves were like, yeah, let's do it. So they overran the landowners. The Spanish and French joined in. So the Spanish and British joined in because, let's put it to the French, and overran the island. So in 1794, the slaves were officially freed. Toussaint L'Ouverture, again, those of you that had my American history class may remember this, who was a former slave and leader of the rebellion, sided with the French Revolution. He pushed the Spanish and British back, but wanted Saint Dominique to be independent and for himself to be governor for life because L'Ouverture was a forward thinker. By 1801, Napoleon wanted Saint Dominique back. L'Ouverture was captured and died in prison because, again, prisons just sucked. By 1803, though, Napoleon was tired of fighting and let them have the island. So on January 1st of 1804, the Independent Republic of Haiti was created. And ever since, America and England and France and Spain have all done what they could to make Haiti as economically dependent on them as possible. And that's why Haiti is in as bad of a shape as it is today, because of these other countries basically strangling it. Because to have a country run by free blacks was seen as intolerable. So yeah, here is their response to the French landowners. Again, this is the bad way to hang people, but obviously done on purpose. Here's, again, the landowners getting what they get. Oh, I don't have Toussaint L'Ouverture. I'm thinking of my American history class. Okay, we'll get back into revolutionary culture next time. I will put the video up on Blackboard for those of you that haven't seen it. Please watch it, and I'll see y'all next week. Have a good one. I'll get your test graded as soon as possible.